Obina was warned about the pot his entire life, warned never to touch it, warned never to look inside it, warned that some things, once opened, do not return to sleep. He listened, until the night his daughter began to die in his arms, until the night a voice whispered to him from the darkness, promising to save her, until the night love made him choose between obedience and desperation. He broke the seal, and what came out was not death. It was something far worse, something that knew his name, something that called him family, something that had been waiting for 70 years just to be remembered. If you enjoy stories rooted in African wisdom, ancestral truth, and the consequences of forgotten warnings, subscribe to Echoes of Wisdom. Because in some villages, the most dangerous thing is not what haunts you in the dark. It is what waits patiently for you to open the door yourself. 7 days before the night Obina broke the seal, he returned to the village he had once called home. And on the night Obina finally understood why the pot was forbidden, this is what he faced. The screen opens to complete darkness. Heavy breathing fills the audio. Then a man's voice, trembling, whispers in Igbo before switching to English. They said I would understand when it was too late. They were right. A single flame flickered to life, revealing Obina, a man in his early 30s, his face covered in sweat, his eyes wide with terror. He is pressed against the mud wall of a traditional hut, clutching something wrapped in white cloth against his chest. Outside, footsteps approach. But these are not ordinary footsteps. They sound like feet walking backwards. Obina closes his eyes and whispers a prayer. Then a child's voice from outside calls his name sweetly, lovingly. Papa, Papa, come outside. I want to show you something. Obina's eyes snap open. Tears stream down his face. That voice belongs to my daughter, but my daughter has been dead for 3 days. The footsteps stop directly outside his door. Then silence. Complete silence. But before we understand how Obina found himself in this nightmare, we must go back, 7 days back, to the moment when everything changed. Oku village sits at the edge of the great forest in Anambra State, where the trees grow so thick that elders say even the afternoon sun must ask permission to enter. This is a village where the old ways still hold power, where children are taught to greet their elders before eating their breakfast, and where certain things are never questioned. The kind of village where secrets are buried so deep that even the earth forgets they exist. The kind of village where warnings are given once and only once, because those who need to hear them twice rarely live to hear them a third time. Obina returned to this village after 15 years in Lagos. 15 years of chasing a dream that kept running away from him. 15 years of watching other men succeed while he struggled just to survive. The city had not been kind to him. His business collapsed when his partner disappeared with their capital. His landlord threw him out when the rent became 3 months overdue. His wife, Adeze, now 7 months pregnant with their 3rd child, had stopped asking when things would get better. She had stopped asking because she already knew the answer. Their 2 daughters, Chiamaka and Chisom, had not eaten properly in weeks. 8-year-old Chiamaka had learned to smile even when her stomach was empty because she did not want to add to her father's shame. 4-year-old Chisom, small and sickly since birth, had developed a cough that medicine could not cure because medicine cost money they did not have. When Obina's mother sent word that his grandmother, Mama Nkiru, was dying and wished to see him before she joined the ancestors, Obina saw it as a sign. Perhaps, he thought, this was God's way of giving him a second chance. Perhaps returning to the village would restore his fortunes. Perhaps the land of his fathers would welcome him back and restore what the city had stolen. He packed what little remained of his dignity into one small bag and boarded a bus heading east. The journey took 8 hours. 8 hours of watching the chaos of Lagos slowly give way to the green embrace of the countryside. 8 hours of remembering the boy he used to be, running through these same forests, climbing these same trees, swimming in these same rivers. That boy had believed he would conquer the world. That boy had believed nothing could stop him. That boy had been a fool. The compound was exactly as Obina remembered it.
Red earth swept clean every morning by hands that understood the importance of keeping things in order. The great mango tree his grandfather had planted the year Nigeria gained independence, now so large that its branches seemed to touch the sky. The old wooden chairs arranged under its shade where elders once gathered to drink palm wine and settle disputes that would have become wars in less wise villages. But something was different. Obinna felt it the moment he stepped through the gate, a heaviness in the air, a silence that seemed to have weight. The chickens that should have been pecking at the ground were nowhere to be seen. The goats that should have been bleating in their pen were quiet. Even the wind, which always blew through Oku village carrying the scent of the forest, seemed to have stopped. And then Obinna saw it. In the far corner of the compound, separated from everything else by a fence of palm fronds that had turned brown with age, sat a small shrine. The shrine was simple, just 4 wooden posts holding up a thatched roof that had seen better days. But in the center of this shrine, resting on a raised platform of hardened mud, sat something that made Obinna's blood run cold. A clay pot. It was not a large pot, perhaps the size of a man's head, but everything about it screamed wrongness. The surface was black, not the black of clay that has been fired in a kiln, but the black of something that has absorbed so much darkness that light itself is afraid to touch it. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, symbols that seemed to move when Obinna looked at them directly, symbols that made his eyes water and his head pound. The lid of the pot was sealed with a substance that looked like dried blood mixed with white chalk, and around the base of the pot, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 small stones that gleamed with an unnatural light. Obinna remembered this pot. As a child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, he had wandered into the shrine while chasing a butterfly. He had reached out to touch the pot, curious about the strange symbols, and his grandmother had appeared out of nowhere, moving faster than he had ever seen an old woman move. She had grabbed his wrist so hard that he cried out in pain, and then she had dragged him out of the shrine and beaten him with a severity that seemed completely disproportionate to his crime. "Never touch that pot," she had said, her voice shaking with something that the young Obinna had not recognized, but the adult Obinna now understood was fear. "Never go near that shrine. Never even look at that pot. Do you understand me? Never." He had asked her why. Just once. Just that one time. The look she had given him still haunted his memories. It was not the look of an angry grandmother. It was the look of someone who had seen things that no human being should ever see. Things that had broken something inside her. Things that she carried like stones in her heart every single day of her life. Because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. That was all she had said, and young Obinna, terrified by what he saw in his grandmother's eyes, had never asked again. Now, standing in the compound as a grown man, Obinna forced himself to look away from the pot. He had more important things to worry about. His grandmother was dying, his family was waiting in Lagos, his life was falling apart. He did not have time for childhood fears. He walked toward the main house, leaving the shrine and its secrets behind him. He did not notice that inside the pot, something had begun to stir.
Mama Nkiru was 93 years old, but her eyes were still sharp like a hawk watching a mouse from 1,000 feet in the air. She lay on a wooden bed covered with white sheets, her body shrunken and frail, her skin so thin that Obinna could see the blue veins underneath. But those eyes, those terrible knowing eyes, tracked him the moment he entered the room. She did not greet him with the joy of a grandmother seeing her grandchild for the first time in 15 years. She did not ask about his wife, his children, his life in Lagos. She did not comment on how tall he had grown, how much he looked like his father, how happy she was to see him before she died. Instead, she looked at him the way a doctor looks at a patient with a terminal illness, with pity, with resignation, with the knowledge that nothing she said would change what was coming. "You have come," she said, her voice a whisper of dry leaves scraping against stone.
Good. There are things you must know before I join my ancestors. She gestured for him to sit on the wooden stool beside her bed. Obina sat, his heart pounding with a fear he could not explain. This compound now belongs to you, Mama Nkiru continued. Everything in it belongs to you. The land that your great-great-grandfather cleared with his own hands, the house that your great-grandfather built with wood from the sacred forest, the trees that have fed our family for generations. Everything, Obina, it all belongs to you now. She paused, and in that pause, Obina felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Everything except one thing. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with a strength that should have been impossible for someone so close to death. Her grip was like iron, her fingers digging into his flesh hard enough to leave bruises. The pot in the shrine must never be opened. Do you understand me? Never. Not for any reason. Not if you are dying of thirst and the pot contains the last water in the world. Not if you are starving and the pot contains enough food to feed 1,000 men. Not if your children are sick and the pot contains the only medicine that can save them. Her eyes burned into his, and in their depths, Obina saw something that made his soul tremble. You must never open that pot. Obina's mouth was dry, his heart racing, but he managed to speak. Mama, what is inside the pot? For a long moment, Mama Nkiru did not answer. She released his wrist and sank back into her pillows, suddenly looking every one of her 93 years. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. Inside that pot is everything our family has ever lost and everything we can never have again. She closed her eyes and Obina thought she had fallen asleep, but then she spoke one more time, her words so quiet that he had to lean close to hear them. I made a mistake once, Obina, a mistake born of love, a mistake that cost me everything. Do not repeat my mistake. Do not let love make you foolish. Do not let grief make you desperate. And no matter what happens, no matter what you hear, no matter what you see, no matter what you feel. She opened her eyes one last time, and in them Obina saw not his grandmother, but something ancient, something that had witnessed horrors beyond human understanding. Do not open that pot. 3 hours later, Mama Nkiru took her last breath and went to join the ancestors she had served her entire life. And Obina, standing at her bedside, made a silent promise that he would honor her final wish. It was a promise he would break in exactly 4 days. The funeral was simple but dignified, as Mama Nkiru would have wanted. Elders came from across the village to pay their respects. Women sang songs of mourning, while men drank palm wine and shared stories of the woman who had held their community together for so many decades. Children too young to understand death ran around playing while their parents wiped tears from their eyes. Obina stood at the graveside, watching as his grandmother's body was lowered into the earth, and he felt nothing. Not grief, not relief. Just a strange emptiness, like a house with all its furniture removed. After the funeral, Obina sent word to Lagos for Adaize to bring the children. The compound was theirs now. The land was theirs. Perhaps this was the fresh start they needed. Perhaps the village would give them what the city had taken away. 3 days later, Adaize arrived with Chiamaka and Chisom. The moment they stepped through the gate, Obina felt something shift in the air. A change in pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. He looked toward the shrine in the corner of the compound, and for just a second, he thought he saw the pot move. But that was impossible. Pots do not move. He shook his head and went to embrace his family. Chiamaka, 8 years old with her mother's stubbornness and her father's pride, immediately began exploring the compound with the enthusiasm of a child discovering a new world. She climbed the mango tree, she chased the chickens that had finally returned from wherever they had been hiding. She declared that this village was much better than Lagos and she never wanted to leave. Chisom, 4 years old and small for her age, clung to her mother's wrapper with eyes that seemed too large for her face. Her cough had gotten worse during the journey, and her skin had taken on a greyish pallor that worried Obina deeply. But the doctors in Lagos had said there was nothing wrong with her, just a weak constitution, just a child who would grow out of it eventually. Looking at his daughter now, Obina was not so sure. That night, after the children were asleep and Adaize was resting, Obina walked through the compound alone. The moon was full, casting silver light across the red earth, and the sounds of the forest created a symphony of insects and night birds that Obina had forgotten how much he missed. He found himself standing before the shrine without realizing he had walked there. The pot sat on its platform, unchanged and unchanging, the dried blood and chalk of its seal glinting faintly in the moonlight. The strange symbols on its surface seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched Obina's heartbeat. "What are you?" he whispered to the pot, not expecting an answer. He did not get one, not in words, but somewhere deep inside his mind, in a place where rational thought could not reach, something stirred, something that had been waiting for someone to ask that exact question. Obina shivered and walked away. Behind him, inside the pot, the thing that had been sleeping for 70 years opened its eyes. The fourth night is when everything changed. Obina woke to the sound of screaming, not the playful screaming of children, but the raw, terrified screaming of a mother watching her child die. He threw himself out of bed and ran to the room where the children slept. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. Chisom was burning with fever. Her small body was so hot that steam seemed to rise from her skin. Her eyes were rolled back in her head, showing only white, and her mouth was open in a silent scream that was somehow worse than any sound could have been. Her little hands clawed at the air, fighting something that only she could see. Adaize was beside her, pressing wet cloths to her forehead, calling her name over and over, begging God and the ancestors and anyone who would listen to save her baby girl. Obina grabbed his daughter and felt her heat through his clothes, felt her small heart beating so fast it seemed ready to burst through her chest. This was not a normal fever. This was not something medicine could fix. "We need to get her to the hospital," he said, his voice surprisingly calm considering the terror that gripped his heart. "The car has no fuel," Adaize cried. "We used the last of it getting here, and the clinic is 20 kilometers away, and it is the middle of the night, and there are no buses, and—" She broke down into sobs, clutching her dying daughter, and Obina felt the walls of the world closing in around him. He ran outside, thinking maybe he could find someone with a car, someone with fuel, someone who could help. But the village was asleep, and the nearest neighbor was a kilometer away, and by the time he could wake someone and explain the situation, Chisom could be dead. He stood in the middle of the compound, his daughter's screams echoing in his ears, and he did something he had not done since he was a child. He prayed. "Please," he whispered, falling to his knees in the red earth. "Please, whoever is listening, whatever you are, please save my daughter. I will give anything. I will do anything. Just please, please do not let her die." For a long moment, there was only silence. The kind of silence that exists in the spaces between heartbeats. The kind of silence that exists at the bottom of the ocean, in the darkness of caves, in the void between stars. And then, a voice spoke. It did not come from anywhere outside Obina. It came from inside his head, warm and comforting like a mother's lullaby, sweet and seductive like a lover's whisper. "Your daughter is dying," the voice said. "Your family is suffering. Your grandmother left you with warnings but no solutions. Is that fair, Obina? Is that love? She knew what was in the pot. She knew it could help you, but she chose to let you struggle while salvation sat locked away just a few meters from where you sleep." Obina's head snapped toward the shrine, toward the pot. "Inside that pot is everything your family has ever lost. Money, health, fortune, success. It was taken from you and locked away by a woman who was too afraid to face the consequences of her own actions. But it belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. All you have to do is take back what is yours." "No," Obina whispered, shaking his head. "No, My grandmother warned me. She said never to open it. She said many things, the voice interrupted. And now there was an edge to it, a hint of something cold beneath the warmth. Your daughter is dying, Obina. Right now, as you kneel in the dirt talking to shadows, your youngest child is slipping away. Is that what you want? Is that what your grandmother wanted for you? A dead daughter, a broken family, a lifetime of grief? Inside the house, Chisholm's screams had stopped. The silence that replaced them was worse. All you have to do is open the pot. Just break the seal. Just lift the lid, and everything you have ever wanted will be yours. Your daughter will live, your family will prosper, your life will finally begin. Obina stood slowly. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. His body moved without his permission, carrying him toward the shrine, step by step by step. The palm frond fence that surrounded the shrine seemed taller than before, but Obina pushed through it easily. The pot sat waiting for him on its platform, gleaming in the moonlight, the strange symbols on its surface pulsing faster now, matching the frantic beating of his heart. Up close, the pot was terrifying in a way that Obina could not articulate. The blackness of its surface was not the absence of color, but the presence of something else, something that drank light and turned it into darkness. The symbols carved on its surface seemed to move when he looked at them, rearranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense, almost formed words, almost became messages from a language that was old when humanity was young. The seal, made of dried blood and chalk, was cracked, just slightly, just a thin line running from top to bottom, and through that crack, a faint glow emanated, a light that was somehow both beautiful and terrible. Obina reached out his hand. "Do not open that pot," his grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. But his grandmother was dead, and his daughter was dying, and the voice in his head was right. What kind of grandmother would leave her family with warnings but no solutions? What kind of love was that? Obina's fingers touched the seal. It was cold, so cold that it burned, but he did not pull away. "For Chisom, I'm doing this for Chisom." He broke the seal. For one eternal moment, nothing happened. The world held its breath. The universe waited. Then a sound emerged from inside the pot. It was not loud. It was barely a whisper, but it was the most terrifying sound Obina had ever heard. It was the sound of something breathing in, deeply, slowly, like a creature taking its first breath after centuries of sleep. The air in the compound changed. It became heavy, thick, syrupy. Breathing became nearly impossible. The moonlight seemed to dim, as if even the sky was afraid of what was about to happen. Obina looked into the pot. He expected to see something, gold perhaps, or medicine, or whatever magical solution would save his daughter's life. Instead, he saw nothing, just darkness, absolute and complete darkness. The kind of darkness that existed before God said, "Let there be light." But this darkness was not empty. This darkness was looking back at him. A hand shot out of the pot and grabbed Obina's wrist. The hand was small, childlike, and cold as death itself. Its grip was impossible to break, impossible even to loosen. It held Obina in place with a strength that no child should possess, with a certainty that suggested it had done this many times before. Then a face emerged from the darkness inside the pot. It was a child's face, a boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. He had features that might once have been handsome, eyes that might once have sparkled with life, a smile that might once have brought joy to everyone who saw it. But this child's eyes were completely white, like marbles made of milk. And this child's smile stretched too far, much too far, past the edges of where a human mouth should end, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp, just a little too numerous, just a little too eager. "Thank you," the child said, and its voice was the same voice that had spoken inside Obina's head, warm and cold at the same time, comforting and terrifying, loving and hungry. "I have been waiting for so long. Your grandmother was cruel, you know. She never visited, she never talked to me, she never fed me. She just left me here in the dark, alone, forgotten, starving. The child pulled itself out of the pot with a fluid motion that no human body should be capable of making. It stood before Obinna, barely reaching his waist, wearing clothes from another era, traditional Isiagu fabric that looked like it had not been washed in 100 years, that smelled of earth and decay, and something else, something sweet and rotten. But you, the child continued, reaching up to pat Obinna's cheek with a hand that left frost wherever it touched. You opened the door. You let me out. Now we can be family again. Obinna tried to speak, tried to scream, tried to run, but his body would not obey him. He was frozen in place, a prisoner in his own flesh, forced to watch as the thing that wore a child's face tilted its head and smiled that impossible smile. You want to save your daughter, yes? I can do that. I can do anything. I can make her fever disappear. I can make her stronger than she has ever been. I can give her a life of health and happiness and everything you have ever dreamed for her. The child's smile widened even further, and Obinna saw that its tongue was black. I just need something in return. Obinna finally found his voice. What do you want? The child laughed, and the sound of that laugh would haunt Obinna's nightmares for the rest of his life. It was the laugh of innocence corrupted, of joy twisted, of love transformed into something monstrous. A trade, the child said. Her life for another. 3 souls entered this compound tonight. Your wife, your daughters, 3 souls, but only 2 can leave. It leaned close, and its breath smelled of graves. If you want your sick daughter to walk out of here alive, someone else must stay, forever, with me. The child stepped back and began walking toward the house where Chisom lay dying. Papa, choose wisely. The sun rises in 4 hours. When the first light touches this compound, I will make the choice for you. And I promise you, you will not like my choice. Then the child giggled, and the sound of that giggle echoed through the compound, bounced off the walls, sank into the earth, and buried itself in Obinna's soul. It has been so long since I had a friend to play with. Obinna ran after the creature, his feet pounding against the red earth, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. But when he entered the house, the thing was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. But something had changed. Chisom lay in her bed, no longer screaming, no longer burning with fever. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her breathing was slow and regular, the breathing of a child in peaceful sleep. Her forehead, when Obinna touched it, was cool and normal. She was healed. Adiaze was kneeling beside the bed, her face wet with tears, her hands clasped in prayer. When she saw Obinna, she cried out in joy. It's a miracle. She was dying. I swear she was dying. And then suddenly, she just got better. Her fever broke. Her breathing normalized. She opened her eyes and smiled at me and then fell asleep. It's a miracle, Obinna. God has saved our daughter. But Obinna knew that it was not God who saved Chisom. And he knew that miracles always came with a price. Where is Chiamaka? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Adiaze frowned. She is in the other room, sleeping. Why? Obinna ran to the room where his eldest daughter should have been sleeping. The bed was empty. He searched the house, calling her name, throwing open doors, looking in every corner, every shadow, every space large enough to hide a child. Nothing. Chiamaka was gone. Then, from outside, he heard her voice. Papa, Papa, come look. There's a boy here. He wants to play with me. Obinna ran outside, following his daughter's voice, his legs moving faster than they had ever moved before. He found her at the shrine, sitting on the ground just outside the palm frond fence, drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. She was talking to empty air, giggling at jokes only she could hear, completely unaware of the danger she was in. "Chiamaka, come here now." His daughter looked up, her face a mask of confusion. "Why, Papa? I'm playing with my new friend. His name is Ike. He says he's been waiting a long time for someone to play with. He says he knows you. He says he's been watching our family for many, many years. Come here, right now. Do not argue with me." Something in Obina's voice must have penetrated his daughter's innocent trust, because she stood up slowly and walked toward him. But before she reached him, she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "He says not to be scared, Papa. He says he just wants a family again. He says if you give him what he wants, he'll make everything better. He'll make us rich. He'll make us happy. He'll make sure nothing bad ever happens to us again." She turned back to Obina, and for just a moment, just one terrible moment, her eyes flickered white. "All he needs is one of us to stay with him forever." Obina grabbed his daughter and carried her into the house, ignoring her cries that she wanted to play with her new friend, that he was hurting her, that she hated him. He did not stop until they were inside, with all the doors locked and all the windows closed. But he knew that doors and windows would not stop what was coming. That night, Obina told Adaize everything. She did not believe him at first. How could she? It sounded like madness, like fevered dreams, like the desperate imaginations of a man who had been pushed past his breaking point. But then, things began to happen that could not be explained. Objects moved on their own. A cup on the table slid 3 inches to the left while they watched. A door opened and closed with no one near it. The temperature in the room dropped so low they could see their breath, then shot up so high they began to sweat. And sometimes, in the corner of their eyes, they saw a small figure watching them, just standing there, waiting, smiling that smile that went too far. At midnight, Chisom woke up. She sat up in bed, her eyes bright and clear, and she asked for food. Adaize rushed to get her something to eat, overjoyed that her daughter was well, ready to believe that everything was going to be okay. But when she returned and went to embrace her child, Chisom leaned close and whispered something that stopped Adaize's heart. "Mama, the boy says thank you for the food. He says he hasn't eaten in so long, but he is still hungry. He says he needs more." Chisom's eyes flickered white for just a moment, then returned to normal. She looked up at her mother with an innocent smile. "Can I have more food, Mama? I'm still hungry too." Adaize backed away from her own daughter, horror written across her face, and she finally understood that her husband had been telling the truth. Something had entered their home, and it was not going to leave until it got what it wanted. Obina knew he needed answers. His grandmother was dead. The village elders knew nothing useful, but somewhere in this village there had to be someone old enough to remember what had happened, someone who knew the truth about the pot and the thing inside it. He found that person in Mama Nkonkwa. Mama Nkonkwa was 104 years old. She no longer walked, her legs having given up decades ago. She no longer saw clearly, her eyes clouded by cataracts that no doctor could remove. But her mind was sharp, sharper than blades forged in sacred fire, and her memory stretched back to a time when the world was different. Obina found her in her compound, sitting in a wheelchair made of wood and wicker, attended by a granddaughter who looked at him with suspicious eyes. "I know why you have come," Mama Okunko said before Obina could speak. Her voice was like dry paper rustling in the wind. "I have been waiting for this day for 70 years. I always knew someone would eventually open that pot. I just hoped it would not be in my lifetime." She gestured for her granddaughter to leave, and when they were alone, she told Obina the truth. 70 years ago, your grandmother had a son. Not your father, but an older brother. His name was Ikechukwu, and he was the light of her life. A beautiful boy, full of laughter and mischief and everything good that a child should be. Your grandmother loved him more than she loved breathing. Mama Okonkwo's clouded eyes seemed to focus on something far away, something that existed only in memory. Ikechukwu died when he was 7 years old. A sickness swept through the village that year, taking many children. The doctors could do nothing. The herbalists could do nothing. We watched our children die, one by one, and there was nothing any of us could do to save them. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was heavy with sorrow. Most of us accepted our losses. We mourned. We buried our children. We moved on, as the living must always move on. But your grandmother, she could not accept it. She could not let her son go. In her grief, she became desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. What did she do? Obina asked, though he already knew he did not want to hear the answer. She went to a dibia, not the kind of medicine man who heals the sick and blesses the newborn. The other kind, the kind who deals with things that no human should deal with, the kind who walks the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and sometimes crosses it. Mama Okonko's voice dropped to a whisper. She asked him to bring her son back. The words hung in the air like poison. The dibia warned her. Mama Okonko continued. He told her that the dead do not return the way they left. He told her that what comes back is never what was lost. He told her that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. But your grandmother did not listen. She was blinded by love, deafened by grief, and she did not listen. The dibia performed the ritual. He called to the other side, and something answered. Something came back. It looked like Ikechukwu. It sounded like Ikechukwu. It had Ikechukwu's memories, Ikechukwu's voice, Ikechukwu's face. But it was not Ikechukwu. Mama Okonko's hands trembled as she spoke. At first, everything seemed normal. The boy played, he laughed, he called your grandmother Mama and hugged her and told her she loved her. For a few weeks, your grandmother believed she had gotten her son back. She believed the impossible had happened. But then, the boy began to change. He stopped eating normal food. He stopped sleeping. He would disappear for hours and return with blood on his clothes but no injuries on his body. Animals began to die. First the chickens, then the goats, then the dogs. They would be found in the morning, drained of blood with expressions of terror frozen on their faces. Then the neighbors started getting sick. The man who lived closest to your grandmother's compound, healthy one day, dead the next. His wife, mad with grief, hanging herself from the mango tree. Their children wandering into the forest and never returning. The thing that wore Ikechukwu's face was feeding on life itself, and it was never satisfied. Obina felt sick. What happened? How did they stop it? The village elders came together and decided that the creature had to be stopped. They tried to kill it, but it could not be killed. Knives passed through it. Fire would not touch it. They tried to bind it with ropes, but it slipped free like smoke. They tried to drown it, but it walked out of the river laughing. Finally, they brought in the oldest dibia in 7 villages, a man so ancient that people said he had been born before the trees. He knew things that had been forgotten by everyone else, things that came from a time before time. This dibia performed a sealing ritual. It took 7 days and 7 nights. He sacrificed 7 goats, 7 chickens, and 7 drops of blood from 7 different elders. He called upon powers that have no names, powers that existed before the gods were born. And finally, he managed to trap the creature in a clay pot. He sealed it with blood and chalk, bound it with symbols of power, and buried it in the one place where it could be watched forever, your grandmother's compound. But the seal was never meant to be permanent, Mama Okonko said. It needed to be renewed every generation with a specific ritual. Your grandmother performed this ritual faithfully for decades. Every year, on the anniversary of Ikechukwu's death, she would renew the seal with blood and prayers and the proper words. But when death came for her, she did not teach you the ritual. She only taught you the warning. Why? Obina asked, his voice breaking. Why would she not teach me how to protect myself, how to protect my family? Mama Okonko's blind eyes seemed to see right through him. Because she hoped the warning would be enough, because she could not bear to speak the words of the ritual, words that forced her to remember what she had done, because she believed that if she never spoke of it, if she never passed on the knowledge, maybe, just maybe, the thing in the pot would fade away and cease to exist. She was wrong. Obinna buried his face in his hands. What do I do now? How do I put it back? How do I save my family? Mama Okonko was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. This seal required something to be given, a sacrifice of blood. To break the seal required the same thing. The creature has attached itself to your youngest daughter because she was the most vulnerable. It healed her, yes, but in doing so, it created a connection. It is feeding on her life force, slowly, gradually, and it will continue feeding until she is empty. Then it will move to the next person, then the next. It will consume your entire family, then the village, then everything beyond. There must be a way to stop it, Obinna pleaded. There must be something I can do. There is one way, Mama Okonko said. The only way to force it back into the pot is to offer it something it wants more than your daughter, something it cannot resist. What does it want? It said it wanted one of us to stay with it forever. Mama Okonko shook her head slowly. That is what it says, but it is not what it truly wants. The creature has been alone for 70 years. It has been forgotten, abandoned, starving not for food, but for something far more essential. It does not want to feed on your family. It wants to belong to your family. She reached out with her withered hand and touched Obinna's chest, right over his heart. It wants to be loved. It wants to be remembered. It wants to be part of something again. The child that was Ikechukwu is still in there somewhere, buried beneath the monster, screaming to be acknowledged. If you can reach that child, if you can give it what it truly desires, it may return to its prison willingly. And if I cannot, Mama Okonko withdrew her hand, then your family will die, your village will die, and the creature will continue to feed until there is nothing left, and then it will move on to the next village, and the next, and the next, until there is nothing left in this world but a hungry, lonely child who just wanted his mother to love him. Obinna returned to his compound as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked too much like blood. He had only hours before the creature's deadline, only hours to find a way to save his family. He found Adiaze sitting in the main room, holding both daughters in her arms. She had drawn a circle of salt around them and was whispering prayers under her breath. Chiamaka looked scared but defiant. Chisom looked normal, happy even, as if nothing unusual was happening. But Obinna could see the truth now. He could see the faint shadow that clung to Chisom's small form, the darkness that flickered at the edges of her daughter's smile. The creature was inside her, attached to her, feeding on her as it kept her alive. He knelt before his family. I know what I have to do, but you will hate me for it. He explained everything Mama Okonko had told him. When he finished, Adiaze's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. You can't. Whatever you are thinking, you can't. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for a monster. I'm not going to sacrifice myself. I'm going to give it what it truly wants. I'm going to give it a family. He stood and walked toward the door. Obinna, no! But he did not stop. This was his mistake, his burden, his blood that started this generations ago. It was his responsibility to end it. The creature was waiting for him at the shrine. It sat on top of the pot, its legs dangling over the edge, kicking back and forth like a normal child might while waiting for dinner. In the fading light of sunset, it almost looked innocent, almost looked like the boy it had once been. You came back, it said, sounding genuinely surprised. Usually they run. Your grandmother ran for many years before she found a way to trap me. Your great-grandmother ran so fast she left the village entirely and never returned. But you came back. It tilted its head and its white eyes gleamed. Why? Obina forced himself to walk forward until he was standing directly in front of the creature. I know who you are, he said, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. I know what you are. You are Ikechukwu. You're my grandmother's first son, my father's older brother, my uncle. The creature's unnatural smile flickered. For just a moment, something else showed through, something that looked almost human. Nobody has called me by that name in a very long time. Because they were afraid of you. But I'm not afraid. I'm angry. Angry at what my grandmother did to you. Angry at what the village did to you. Angry at everyone who chose to forget you instead of trying to understand you. Obina took a deep breath. My grandmother brought you back wrong. That wasn't your fault. It was her fault. She was so desperate to have you back that she didn't think about what it would mean for you. And then, when she couldn't fix what she had done, she locked you away and pretended you never existed. She erased you from our family history. She never spoke your name. She never told stories about you. She never honored your memory. She just forgot you. The creature's smell faded completely, and underneath it, Obina saw something that broke his heart. Pain. Raw, ancient, unbearable pain. She forgot me, the creature whispered. She called me back from the other side. She pulled me out of the peace I had found. She made me this thing, and then she forgot me. Do you know what that feels like? To be wanted so desperately that someone breaks the laws of nature to bring you back, and then to be thrown away when you become inconvenient. Tears began to stream down the creature's face. Real tears. Human tears. I didn't ask to come back. I didn't ask to become this monster. I was at peace. I was happy. I was with the ancestors, and they were teaching me songs, and I was learning to fly, and then she pulled me away from all of it because she couldn't let go. The creature's form flickered, and for a moment, Obina saw not a monster, but a scared little boy, confused and hurt and desperately alone. And then she locked me in a pot in the dark for 70 years. Do you know what it's like to be alone in the dark for 70 years? To have nothing but your own thoughts? To hear your family walking above you, living their lives, and never once stopping to remember that you exist? Obina stepped closer. No, I don't know what that feels like, but I know what it feels like to lose a child. I almost lost my daughter tonight. The thought of losing her drove me to madness. It made me do something foolish, just like it made my grandmother do something foolish. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was an old photograph, faded and cracked, its edges worn by years of handling. The photograph showed a young woman holding a baby. The woman was Mama Nkiru, decades younger, with a smile of pure joy on her face. The baby was Ikechukwu, tiny and perfect and loved. Obina said, I found this in my grandmother's things. It was hidden under her pillow. She looked at it every night before she slept, every single night for 70 years. He held out the photograph. She never forgot you, Ikechukwu. She never stopped loving you. She was just afraid of what she had done, afraid of what you had become, afraid that if she came to you, if she acknowledged you, she would have to face the consequences of her own actions. But her love never died. It was twisted and broken and full of guilt, but it never died. The creature reached out and took the photograph with trembling hands. It stared at the image for a long time, and something changed in its face. The monstrous features began to soften. The white eyes began to show flickers of brown. The smile that had stretched too far settled into something more natural. She kept this, it whispered, all these years? All these years, and now she is gone. She is with the ancestors, and I think I think she has been waiting for you. I think she has been waiting for 70 years to tell you she's sorry, to hold you again, to be your mother again." Obina knelt so he was at eye level with the creature. "If you return to the pot, I will perform the proper burial rites for you. I will add your name to our family shrine. I will tell my daughters stories about their great-uncle Ikechukwu, who died too young but was never forgotten. Every year, on the anniversary of your death, we will pour libation in your honor. We will speak your name. We will remember you. You will not be forgotten anymore. You will be part of our family again, not as a monster, not as something to be feared, as a brother, as a son, as an uncle." The creature looked at the photograph, then at Obina, then at the pot. "You would do that after everything I have done? After threatening your children? After terrifying your wife? After feeding on your daughter's life force? You would still call me family?" Obina reached out and took the creature's hand. It was no longer cold. It was warm, like a living child's hand should be. "Your family. Family forgives. That's what family does. That's what we should have done 70 years ago. That's what we should have done all along." For a long moment, the creature did not move. It stood frozen, staring at Obina with eyes that were slowly returning to normal. Brown eyes filled with tears and hope, and something that might have been love. Then, slowly, it began to cry. Not the tears of a monster, the tears of a child, a scared, lonely, hot child who had been waiting for 70 years to hear the words that Obina had just spoken. "I'm tired," Ikechukwu whispered. "I have been so tired for so long. The hunger, it never stops. It eats at me from the inside. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted someone to remember me. I just wanted someone to love me." "I know," Obina said, "and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what my grandmother did to you. I'm sorry for what the village did to you. I'm sorry that you have suffered for so long. But it's over now. You can rest now." Ikechukwu looked toward the house, where Chisom and Chiamaka huddled with their mother. "Will you really tell them about me? Will they really know my name?" "I promise they will know everything. They will know that they had an uncle who loved his mother so much that he came back from the dead to be with her. They will know that he suffered for 70 years because love sometimes makes us do terrible things. And they will know that in the end, he found peace." Ikechukwu nodded slowly. Then, still holding the photograph in one hand and Obina's hand in the other, he walked toward the pot. He paused at the edge and looked back one last time. "Tell my sister I'm sorry, your grandmother. When you see her on the other side, many years from now, tell her I understand. Tell her I forgive her. Tell her I'm coming home." "I will." Ikechukwu smiled. Not the monstrous smile that stretched too far, a real smile. The smile of a 7-year-old boy who has finally found peace. "Thank you, nephew. Thank you for remembering me." Then he climbed into the pot. As he descended into the darkness, his form became transparent, then faded into a soft golden light. The light sank into the pot, and for just a moment, Ikechukwu heard something that sounded like singing. Beautiful, peaceful singing. The kind of song ancestors sing to welcome their children home. Then, silence. Ikechukwu took the blood and chalk that his grandmother had kept hidden in her room and resealed the pot. But this time, he did not seal it with fear. He sealed it with love, with remembrance, with the promise of a family that would never forget. When he returned to the house, Chisom was sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, completely healed, the shadow that had clung to her gone forever. Chiamaka no longer spoke of the boy in the shrine, and Adaeze held her husband and cried tears of relief. "Is it over?" she asked. Ikechukwu looked toward the shrine, where the first stars of evening were beginning to appear above the sealed pot. "No," he said, "it's not over. It's just beginning. We have a lot of stories to tell, a lot of memories to honor, a lot of love to make up for." He pulled his family close, "But we will do it together, as a family, the whole family." Few months later, the compound of Obina's family was full of life. Children played under the great mango tree, chasing each other and laughing. Neighbors gathered for a celebration, eating jollof rice and pepper soup and pounded yam. Palm wine flowed freely, and elders told stories of the old days, while young people rolled their eyes and pretended not to listen. But in a corner of the compound, something had changed. A new addition had been made to the family shrine. A small headstone, carved from local stone, bearing a name that had not been spoken in 70 years. Ikechukwu Okafo, beloved son, brother, and uncle. Gone, but never forgotten. Rest now in peace. Fresh flowers lay before the headstone, placed there that morning by two little girls who had learned the story of their great uncle and had decided that he deserved to be remembered. Obina stood before the shrine, holding a calabash of palm wine. Behind him, his family gathered. Adaze, heavy with their third child; Chiamaka, now 9 years old and already showing signs of becoming a formidable woman; Chisom, healthy and strong, the sickness of her childhood now just a distant memory. And in Adaze's belly, a son they had already decided to name Ikechukwu. Obina poured the palm wine on the ground before the headstone. "For our uncle Ikechukwu," he said, his voice steady and clear, "who loved his mother so much that he refused to leave her, who suffered in loneliness so that we could learn the importance of family, who taught us that love, even when it makes us do terrible things, is still the most powerful force in the world. We remember you today. We honor you today. You are not forgotten." Inside the pot, if anyone could hear, there was no longer the sound of something hungry and waiting. There was only the sound of peaceful silence. The silence of something that had finally found rest. The silence of a child who had finally come home. And in Oku village, the old shrine still stood, watching, remembering, guarding the boundary between love and loss. Because sometimes the most dangerous things are not born from evil. They are born from love that refused to let go. Love that broke the natural order. Love that opened doors never meant to be opened. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is not fighting the darkness. It is choosing to remember what the world tried to forget. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that every warning carries a reason, then take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Wisdom by Crystal, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because here, we do not just tell stories, we remember them. And in remembering them, we keep the wisdom alive.